Hello, hello. This is Casey Ruff, and welcome to episode 24 of season 2. Today we are speaking with Maggie Stewart. Maggie is an ACE certified personal trainer and Primal health coach who lives in rural New Hampshire and vacations on Maui, where she is lucky enough to have family. That is very lucky. She is the host of the Off of the Couch podcast, which is aimed at helping beginners to exercise and helps listeners to get started creating a fit future by taking small steps into fitness. And I was recently hosted on the Off the Couch podcast, had a great time with Maggie. It was a really fun conversation. So Maggie Stewart, welcome to the How to Make a podcast.
Thank you so much, Casey. And I really enjoyed interviewing you as well.
I had a really great time on your show. You are in New Hampshire and you get to spend time in Maui. That's pretty amazing.
Yeah, my sister moved there about 20 years ago, and it took me a while to realize that I could fly there and have a free place to stay. And now I go pretty much every year.
Oh, that's amazing. Wow. Okay, so I've been to Maui twice. Both of them when I was a teenager, so I didn't really truly appreciate either one. The first time I went was our family vacation. It was a week after 9/11, so you can imagine the plane was like halfway full. There were metal detectors everywhere. Like everything had changed. It was a strange feeling. And I remember the next trip we went with our family. This is like right at the time that MS Messenger, I want to say, was like kind of on the come up, and like it was more popular to message people on the internet. And I missed all my friends from college, and so I spent way too much time in the hotel lobby, like messaging people on MS Messenger. Really didn't appreciate Maui as much as I should have, and I haven't been back since. So I need to go back. That's awesome. I'll definitely need to make it there. And as we talked about on your show, I need to make it up to New Hampshire in the fall. It sounds like it's absolutely wonderful with all the fall colors.
It is really spectacular up here at that time. Yeah, it's nice in the summer, but fall is really just so beautiful.
Oh, that's great. I think it's a lot more humid where you are. We're here in Salt Lake City. It's why we get such dry and fluffy snow. So everybody loves to come to Utah to ski because it's just pure powder, completely light. But the people that come from back east that ski around where you are think we're all just pansies over here because you guys are skiing on like just sheer ice and can like really truly ski. We're a little bit softer over here.
Yeah, I'm kind of a intermediate skier, and yeah, the ice is nasty.
Well, I think if you could ski there, you would love to ski over here. It's a lot easier. I think that's great.
Sounds good.
So for somebody who's listening and maybe is interested in podcasting, but isn't as tuned in as much to the health world, can you explain what a primal health coach is?
Yeah, the primal health coach uses more ancestral principles when coaching their clients. Like, there are a lot of health coach offerings through fitness certifications like ACE, and they were pretty standard fare with what we talked about when we chatted a couple of weeks ago was, weeding out the fat in your diet and looking at calorie in, calorie out. The primal health coach takes an ancestral perspective in that humans were hunter-gatherers for a very long time. They didn't have little 100 calorie packs of Oreos, and they ate, meat, and they had periods where they didn't have as much food. So they might not have had 3 meals and 3 snacks every day. It just looks at more of a historical perspective on what humans evolved eating.
Yeah, that's so interesting. I think a lot of people don't realize those things. We're so used to, having our snacks. We're used to hearing that breakfast is the most important meal of the day. We're used to, thinking that we need to eat every 2 to 3 hours and doing a lot of meal prep. But when we really truly think about, how we evolved, sometimes it's hard to fathom how long we evolved as humans. And so if you put it on kind of a more reasonable time scale, it's like if our human evolution was like a week, we have been, doing things like agriculture for maybe the last few hours, and we have been eating more processed foods maybe in the last few minutes of that. It's very new that we would go to the store and buy, even things like fruits and vegetables all year round. Those things were very seasonal, let alone the things that, we're eating a ton of, which come in boxes and cans and bags. But it's kind of become normalized now, hasn't it?
Yeah, and that's what I found, that the ACE certification and the other health coach through fitness organizations were using those processed foods. And I just resonated with the program for some reason. And normally I'm pretty thrifty, and I, trying to save money and how can I, do this less expensively. I think you'll find that out when I tell you how I do my podcast. But for some reason, I resonated with the Primal Health Coach curriculum, and I did the discovery call, and I really liked the person I spoke with and resonated with her story. And then, we had, I was telling you about the weather we had this week. We had this really oddball weather, same thing, like huge storm, big power outage. For some reason, it just shook me up. And I think I was able to tune into the fact that I really wanted to do this program. So that's not how I usually make my decisions, but it was just a real oddball event. And I just kind of looked at my life from a bigger perspective, like, what are you doing? What do you want to do? And sometimes you need those little shakeups in your life. And I signed up. So
yeah. Wow. Good for you. That's awesome. No, it's great. You mentioned the cost of food. I think a lot of people assume that when you're eating a healthy diet, you're going to be spending a lot more money, or you're going to be spending a lot more time in the kitchen. And I recently added up a typical day for me and the things that I eat and how much time it took me to prepare and how much cost was associated with that. And it was really less than $20, and it was less than about an hour worrying about my food for the day. So if you're out there and thinking like getting into health and fitness and eating healthier is going to be, cost prohibitive, that is absolutely not the case. I spend far less time now, worrying about my food, and I spend far less money than I used to.
Yeah, and if you look at food quality, and you buy a lot of one ingredient foods, you're not buying that packaged stuff really has very little food quality in the whole package most of the time. Like when everybody was eating the cereal that supposedly lowered their cholesterol, you get a really big box for what, $4 or $5, and how much actual nutritional value is in there. There's 4 different kinds of sugar and some grains. It's really pretty cheap ingredients.
Yeah, that's right. With no nutrition, like you said. But then if you turn around the box and look at the suggested serving size on something like cold cereal, the serving size is a quantity of cereal that has never been eaten by any human ever. Like no question.
Like a third of a cup or something.
Oh yeah, like half a cup, a third of a cup. Like who eats cereal in a third of a cup? I would tear down like 2 boxes and never be full eating that stuff. It's crazy.
Yeah, and then you find yourself starving about an hour and a half later too.
That's right.
When
your
blood sugar drops.
That's right. Yeah, that's right. So how did you first get interested in fitness?
Well, that is a pretty long story. As you know, I'm in my mid 60s. So way back in the day, when I got out of college, I went to college for forestry. And I think I'm pretty lucky because I know some women that are probably just 3 or 4 years older than me that say they wanted to do that, but they were told they could just be the secretary. So this was, I in the late 70s, I switched my major to forestry. And when I graduated, I took a seasonal job with the Sequoia National Forest and went west. And being a woman in an agency that was predominantly men, there were other women too, but I didn't want to make a fool of myself. I knew I didn't have to necessarily keep up with the guys, but I didn't want to, be the weakling that held everybody back either. So I started going to the gym, and it did happen that a Nautilus gym had opened in the college town where I lived in Pennsylvania. And so I got an introduction to it then. And then when I moved to California, I was in a pretty rural area, so there was no gym, but we ran and we did PT a little bit. And actually, my friends and I would get together and do stuff like the Jane Fonda workout that was on. I think we had a record or cassette at that time. So fitness was just a value that we knew that we didn't want to look like fools around the guys. And then it was a seasonal job. So I went to grad school in the winter, and I wanted to stay in shape so that when I went back to work, for the season, I was still in good shape. So I really got into an exercise habit. And if I did slack off, I could really feel the difference, like in just how I felt, my mental health. If you develop an exercise habit, you feel much better than when you're sitting around on the couch. So being a slug. So I just really was able to feel the value of exercise.
Yeah, that's great. And what a great segue into your podcast. So you decided to start a podcast. Off of the Couch is the name of it. And it's really aimed at helping people create those healthy habits. And you're right. Once you establish the habit, it's really hard to get rid of, and you start to appreciate all the things that those habits are bringing to your life. So when did you start thinking that you might want to start a podcast, and how did you decide that that was going to be your target audience and those were the type of people that you wanted to talk to?
Well, I got my fitness certification about 25 years ago, and after divorce, and and that's always kind of been my target audience for some reason. It was, I guess, anybody that was looking for a trainer, but my focus was on helping people that thought maybe they didn't like to exercise get started. And I did like a kind of a dance exercise class, but we did do a dumbbell workout. I added strength training into the class, but made it really fun. And I had a bunch of ladies that would come, and they really liked the class. For some reason, the beginner exercise has always been my target. I'm not super fit. I wouldn't consider myself an athlete. I do, some 5Ks and fun events, but I always saw that I wanted to reach out to people that didn't know how easy and fun it could be to just add that little bit of exercise every week, and what a difference it would make to your life. So a number of years ago, I wrote a very small Kindle book, and I had a coaching client, a person that had reached out to me for coaching, that had happened to have read the book and used it with a few friends. And somewhere I just got the idea that maybe I could reach out by doing a podcast. And here, I just kind of dove in.
Wow. Wow, that's great. What were some of these obstacles you had to face, especially early on when you're thinking about doing a podcast?
Well, that's a whole nother story. My elderly mother just actually passed away in May, but she was in her 90s and lived a very long, good life. The last couple of years were a little bit tough. She had a couple of falls, and I would have to drive down from New Hampshire down to Delaware and help her out. And I spent a lot of time driving back and forth. And so I probably got the idea because I listened to so many podcasts on my drive, to be honest. And I also saw, she was one of those older people that towards the end of her life, if she felt she couldn't get up, she had lost her muscle tone, sarcopenia, type 2 diabetes. So the importance of it, weighed on me, as well as having that time in the car that I was listening to a lot of podcasts. And I started reaching out to people I wanted to interview. And then we ended up helping her move to my sister's in Maui for, her final months, when she would have had to be in a facility without family around down in Delaware, or come up here, which she didn't really want to come up to New Hampshire. Didn't really like the weather up here. And so, where would you go? Maui or?
It's justified.
Yeah, New Hampshire was nice there, warm, comfortable. And my sister was able to have her at her home, which was also flat. We could push a wheelchair around. So I ended up going out there for a little while and helping her settle in and get comfortable and get things all set up for her. And that's about the same time that I had arranged to do some interviews. So I had purchased like a microphone and planned to do it on my laptop, but I didn't end up taking it with me and ended up doing it over the phone. So there were definitely some obstacles, and I didn't, you can see I'm just using this little microphone right now, and obviously I could do something better, but my first ones were just through my phone, and there was some background noise, and I didn't really know how to edit all of it out. So, it's definitely been a learning process.
Yeah. So how has your equipment evolved over time? Are there things that you have invested in that you initially didn't invest in, or how did you end up improving your quality over time?
I really have just been using this little microphone and making sure I had a quieter spot. And sometimes I've used, I've used that conference call line or I use Zoom. So I really have not done, I see you have a really nice boom microphone there. I really have not done a lot of investing, and I think that's what I'll look at for season 2, but like I said, I just had some people that I wanted to interview, and then I ended up being on the road traveling, and I just jumped in and started anyway.
No, that's great. I think that's really empowering for people who are maybe considering starting a podcast. Is like, yeah, we have this, nice boom. We've got a microphone here that's made for podcasting. I did invest in this. I didn't start with this. I started with an Amazon microphone that was like $40. Yeah. And, this was more expensive, and I'm glad I have it now, especially, but I would say there's not a vast difference between the two as far as quality. We had listened to some of our earlier episodes, and they're certainly not great. And we're proud of our progress over time, that we're asking better questions and whatever, but the quality was okay, and it's a way that you can still get out that information for the listener, again, who's thinking about maybe starting a podcast. Would you agree that the best thing is just to start with something, whatever you have, and just hit record?
I absolutely agree, because I think you can try really hard to be perfect, and then you're just going to keep putting it off. And I think I heard you say that for yours as well. You were gonna wait, and then your wife said no. we're going to record. And I have the same thing. I had kind of arranged. I had 2 really good guests for my first couple podcasts. One was Kate Willett Cressinger. I don't know if she's just somebody who lives locally to me that I had met for coffee to talk about health coaching, and it turned out she was going to be riding her bicycle, virtually across America in a big race, and I hadn't really realized that. And then, so of course, she was interested in telling that story, and I had the opportunity to interview her. I was not going to turn that down. Now, looking back, I probably had like roosters crowing in the background, and I have since learned if I really talk over somebody a lot, I can edit it out. I leave in little stuff, but if I really screw up, I edit it out now.
Gotcha. What are you using for editing?
So I'm actually using the Anchor app, and I edit it myself. It shows the audio on the phone, and I just play it back to myself, and then when I just go back and forth a little bit if there's a place where I'm like coughing a lot or saying, oh no, you go. You tend to do that a lot at first, especially if you're just doing it by phone, because you don't have really the visual cues. And so it's pretty simple to edit it out. It's not too bad.
And you're actually doing the editing on your phone?
I'm doing the editing on my phone.
Wow,
with the
cool.
Anchor app.
That's great. I didn't think you would be able to do that. That's great. Does Anchor charge you at all?
They do not.
It's free.
They do not. It's a free app. They actually are doing a thing now where I've put out enough podcasts. Do you want to monetize? And I've been hitting no. So I don't think I have enough people that have actually downloaded it and listeners, but I have enough episodes. So
Wow, that's great.
that they're offering me that. So
that's great.
yeah.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned that. This is something we get asked all the time, is monetization. Is monetization something that you think you will do down the road?
I don't know. I think I really would like to get better at it. Like I said, maybe invest in some slightly more professional equipment. And the laptop I have is like kind of a dinosaur, and I'm not really happy with it. That's why I just kept doing it on my phone.
Wow. Oh, that's awesome. I can tell you from somebody who runs our entire business off of a laptop. I'm looking at the older laptop that I used for so long. It wasn't until recently I finally just said, this is ridiculous. I need to spend the money and get a new laptop. The new laptop is like 3 times as fast. I'm so much more productive. So yeah, the laptop definitely helps. I'm a cheapskate for sure. And so I resisted that one for a really long time. But yeah, okay. So with Anchor, what other like key features do they offer? I'm not as familiar with their service. I've seen them pop up from time to time, but what other things do they offer you?
Well, the music that I do it right through them. It's pretty easy to import your files right onto them. If I do a Zoom, then I do have to open my laptop to get the file from Zoom and put it on Anchor. And I don't know if there's a way to do it on my phone. I know how to do it on my laptop. So I do use that because I have done probably most of my recordings using that conference call line. And then, but if somebody lives in another country and it would be a long distance call, or one person was just having phone issues, we did it over Zoom. Yeah, another person, the quality wasn't good over the phone. I did have one podcast I actually had to redo, and we did that by Zoom. It came out a little bit better. So I'm not sure why, but yeah, so with the laptop, I can import it from Zoom right to Anchor, but then still go to my phone to do the editing.
Wow. Oh, that's great. It's so cool that that's all in one place. Are they also helping you with hosting? Are they the ones that are helping you get your podcast listed on places like Apple and Spotify and Google Podcasts and things like that?
Yes. There's a little process you have to go. It automatically goes to Spotify, and then you have to add it to the other ones. And yeah, Apple was a little trickier, but I believe I did successfully get it.
Yeah, that's right. That's where I listen to your podcast, so that must be working.
Okay, good. That's good.
I remember the Apple one to get pushed out. It was, the form was okay, but it seems like they have such a backlog. It just took a long time. I remember it taking like a week or 2.
Yeah, Apple took longer, definitely. Google was pretty quick, and it's actually a Spotify product, and the Anchor app. So it automatically goes to Spotify. And, like I said, I'm in my 60s. I'm a fan of Neil Young. I'm not such a fan of Joe Rogan. That whole controversy came out right after I started the podcast, but I had put a lot of effort into it, so I wasn't going to switch.
Yeah, that's great. Well, look, like I said, I am not very familiar with Anchor. You're really selling me on this platform. It seems like a really simple way of doing things. And in the beginning, at least for me, and it sounds like the same for you, anything that was complicated was going to be the absolute killer of the podcast. If something was too complex, if I wasn't able to understand something or, handle the editing or whatever, the podcast would not have been done. Anything that made things more simple allowed us to be able to do that. And it sounds like that's absolutely the case with you.
Yeah. And the other thing I would like to invest in is something I think you have is it, what's it called? The recorder that you can actually do them in person. What's it called? The Roadcaster? Or?
Yeah, so we have the Roadcaster here, so you can see. So this was all about simplicity. So this thing was pretty expensive. This was $600. It might be a little bit less now because the second version of this thing has just come out not too long ago, which is kind of cool. I still need to dig into like what the additional features are. But yeah, so with the Roadcaster, again, the investment was up front. That's $600, but everything is contained all in the one thing. So I don't use a laptop when I'm recording. Everything gets saved to a micro SD card, all the fading and everything. Like if I want to make my level's really low or really high. Everything is here. I can mute myself, so that, I'm not talking over my guests and blah, blah, blah. So all of that is here, which is really nice. It also plays the intro music, the outro music, if you like. There's different sound effects like clapping, which I don't think you can hear on your end anyway.
Nice.
And so that made it really easy and all self-contained into one thing. But you're right, like with the in-person, it does allow up to 4 different lines that you can connect into to do in-person conversations. And so that works well when, my wife Bethany wants to co-host an episode. I just have a separate microphone that we hook up, or if we're doing an in-person interview, we do the same thing and we can just hook it up and do it there. So it's nice. I'm glad that I got it. Again, it does make things very simple, but I also really appreciate the way that you're doing things and keeping things just really, really basic and simple. And you're coming out with a really good product. The show is entertaining and interesting, and you do a great job with it.
Oh, thank you very much. Yeah, I think it'll convince the last 5 people that don't have podcasts to get started.
That's right. It's the hardest part. Just push and record on that first episode. I want to talk about you personally. We've talked a little bit about equipment and editing and things like that. How have you gotten better as a podcaster since starting this journey?
Well, I hope I have, and I do find if I put a bunch ahead and then take a few weeks off of recording, I almost feel like I'm starting back over. I think it just takes that practice of knowing what question. I usually do jot down questions, but sometimes you don't know which direction the conversation is going to go. I think it honestly just takes practice, and then it has also helped that I've learned to edit a little better too.
Yeah, that's great. So the questions thing, I'm glad you brought that up as well. Before we were doing video, which you mentioned earlier, it is valuable to be able to see somebody and be able to have that kind of conversation. Those visual cues, I have to admit, have gone a long way, because we did at least 1.5 years where we were just doing audio only. And, we missed a little bit of that component for sure. But what it did was allow me to have, a set of questions that I could, dictate out on my phone and then print out to have with me. And it wasn't very distracting, because I'd be listening to somebody and I would look down and I could even almost read word for word what the question was. And one of the funny things that's happened is, since we do video now, it looks like visually, if I'm looking down here as you're answering a question, it looks like I'm ignoring you. It looks like I'm not paying attention to you. And so it's forced me a little bit to either have the questions up somewhere near where I'm recording. One of the other podcasters that we talk to, he does use a laptop, and he'll have the Zoom on the very top and then maybe some questions on the bottom, so it doesn't look like he's looking away. And I thought both of those were a good idea, but frankly, that is one thing I missed. That we're doing video, sometimes I've gotten stuck where I had in my head formulated a question, but kind of forgot it in the moment, and that I would say is a little bit of a disadvantage. So I think that's cool that you're writing them out, at least, or having like a direction to go. Do you feel like your questions have become more interesting over time?
Gosh, I think so. I hope so. Sometimes I do forget. But I do find that when I do it over the phone with audio only, that I feel like I listen a little better. I found when I first did Zoom, I was very distracted because I was worried about like, oh, how's my hair? Is my house clean behind me? Or, but there's definitely advantages to both. Sometimes you definitely feel more connected with the person when you can see them. There's advantages to both.
Yeah, well said. There's advantages and disadvantages either way you look at it. I really like that. Are there any other ways that you can think of that you've become better at podcasting over time, or is that the main one?
Oh, see, now I have like heavy equipment.
There you go.
My front yard beeping. Well, when I use the conference call line, like I was listening to your How to Make a podcast now, like I had missed quite a few episodes and I've been listening to it, and you talk about using the mute button, and that's very easy on Zoom because you can just hit it. But on my conference call line, the number pad covers the mute button. And so I was doing an interview, probably the one before last, that I had made myself a a smoothie. And the guy was telling a story, and I started choking like on my smoothie, and
Oh
I
no.
couldn't reach the mute button, and I was kind of panicking. And it was literally, he was talking about 9/11 and how he from Staten Island was able to see the towers fall down. So obviously I'm not going to edit that out, and I'm trying not to like cough and choke really loud. So that's one thing I will look more into, making sure I can mute myself.
That's hilarious. You know what's so funny? I was just listening to that episode as I was walking back to the house to record this. So I heard his story, and what an amazing story that he actually saw the towers fall that day. So crazy. But I didn't hear you. I didn't hear you choking on your smoothie.
Good.
So that didn't come across.
Because I wasn't going to edit out that story. Definitely, that was, that was very emotional. And yeah, that's good. I was kind of panicking, like trying not to cough into the microphone. So
yeah, well, that definitely didn't come through, and I'm glad you didn't edit that part out. I was thinking, it's so amazing the people that were around that area, especially around 9/11, how much that shifted so many people's lives, witnessing it or being close to it. Like, so many people tell a story where that was the transformational thing that moved their life in a completely different direction. Pretty crazy.
Yeah, I think that, and I think the pandemic in a different way is going to be, well, obviously it is, the mass resignation and people learning they can work remotely and that it's a lot more efficient. I think those two things have shaped, a lot of our lives. And
Agreed. If it wasn't for the pandemic, we would not be talking right now. We would not own our own business. That's completely shifted, what we were doing. So yeah, that's pretty crazy. You mentioned taking a break. You also mentioned earlier on maybe doing different episodes. So this is another question I get quite a bit. Like, I've been podcasting for 6 months, a year. I'm maybe wanting to take a break. What's the best way to kind of take a break? And, do I do different seasons? Do I bank up a bunch of episodes so they're all going to release automatically? How are you thinking about the ways that you might take a break, or you might start a different season?
Yeah, I've been trying to figure that out myself. I might just take a short summer vacation. The other thing I'm thinking of doing is recording my little book as an audio book. Can you hear them back there?
I couldn't hear that one. That's funny.
There's some kind of a sawing out there. I think they're probably going to cut down the other trees that hopefully won't fall on the power lines.
Yeah, funny. So on this podcast, this is a good example and good place to talk about. The two edits I would have made would be when we heard the beeping and then what you just said. With this podcast, we don't edit anything out. But for the listener, like, those are the kinds of things you want to be thinking about as far as where are you going to make your edits. So yeah, I just wanted to make that point. Anyway, we'll go back to you and starting another season.
Yeah, I just think I need a little time to regroup and maybe get some fancier equipment. Not that I would necessarily use it all the time. If I had an opportunity to interview someone, I think it's better to just do it than to have the perfect setup, But yeah, I'm thinking of just taking, a short break. It has been an emotional year for me with the passing of my mom. And so a lot of the recording was done kind of like in between helping out with that. But it also really made me realize, how important it is, like how much better the ends of our life can be, hopefully, if we maintain our health and fitness. And I don't think it's necessary for people to not be able to get up off the floor, and out of a chair. And I think it's just a pretty simple routine of even a little bit of exercise regularly that will really increase the quality of people's lives. And that's really the message that I'm hoping to get across. And I think it's tricky with a podcast because, when you're doing a fitness podcast, all the fitness people are going to listen to that. How can they get a little faster? How can they get a little better? But when you're aiming for people that don't exercise, how do you get them to tune in,
Yeah.
So it's a tricky subject.
It is tough to find that exact audience, but you're so right. I love that message, and it absolutely needs to get out there. That like when the average person looks around and they see what's happening to all the other average human beings, we just start to assume that this is the normal thing. I'm going to age. I'm going to get dementia. I'm going to become obese. I'm going to have type 2 diabetes. Those are just like the average things that happen. And I agree with you 100%. I think that is absolutely average and not normal. Normal is you are able to get up and out of your chair. You're able to care for your family. You're able to prepare meals and share all the way up until the end of your life without being on medications or needing help and support. I think that's such a wonderful message. And you do such a great job in your podcast of sharing that message. So I do really appreciate that. This has been such a wonderful conversation. I definitely learned a lot, and I know the listener will as well. And if nothing else, I think that advice that you share about just starting, get it going, don't let good be the enemy of perfect, refine along the way, learn how to do this a little bit better, craft better questions, improve as you go. But if you are looking to do the perfect thing right from the beginning, you're not going to get started, and you're going to miss time. And again, with something like your message, what you're trying to share, that's life changing. That can save somebody's life. That can change somebody's life for the better. So I'm really glad that you're doing what you're doing. I'm really glad that you shared that message with us today. Tell people where they can go, so they can find you and they can find your show and connect with you.
Well, my show is called Off of the Couch, and you can find it on Spotify, Google, and Apple. And I am on Instagram at Off of the Couch, and also Twitter. I do have a website. My website is a little generic. That's another thing I want to work on my break, to personalize it. I was happy to just get it to work, and then I kind of let it be, and haven't done a lot with it. So, but you can find me at Off of the Couch.
Awesome. We will link to that in the notes. Maggie Stewart, this has been such a fun conversation. Thank you so much for spending some time with us today. Thank you for your example and your message. And it's just really empowering and awesome. We're just so grateful for you. And thank you so much for spending some time with us today.
Thank you so much, Casey.